There's a certain kind of magic that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with thunder or glowing wands or a chosen one standing in destiny's spotlight. No, this kind of magic hides, quietly, patiently, in ordinary places, waiting for someone curious enough or lost enough to notice. I've always been drawn to stories like that. Not the loud ones, not the obvious ones, but the ones that feel like they could be real if you just took a wrong turn on a summer afternoon. That's why the Enchanted Castle stayed with me. There's something deeply unsettling about it. The idea that wonder and danger can exist side by side, that a game can stop being a game, that imagination, when left unchecked, begins to shape reality itself. And maybe that's why we're here. Welcome back, Grimoire Guardians. I'm Garth Beckett, and tonight, we're not just opening a book. We're stepping into a place where walls remember, where shadows listen, and where 3 children are about to discover that magic doesn't care if you're ready for it. This is the Enchanted Castle, Chapter 1. Enhanced through thoughtful use of AI, shaped with care, sound design crafted by Team Grimoire, not to replace the story, never that, but to let you feel it, closer, stranger, more alive. So listen carefully, because once the door opens, it doesn't always close the same way. There were 3 of them. The story begins, as many good ones do, with names spoken in different tones by different mouths. Jerry, though the church had christened him Gerald. Jimmy James, when adults required seriousness. And Kathleen, who was almost never Kathleen at all. To her brothers, she was Kathy when peace reigned, Catty when affection became teasing, Pusscat when they were merry, and Scratch Cat when war was declared. 3 children, one alliance forever forming and reforming. They were kept at school in a small town in the west of England, where the streets were narrow and clean in places, muddy in others, and always faintly scented with coal smoke, wet stone, and bread from the baker's ovens at dawn. Church bells marked the hours whether anyone asked them to or not. Rain polished the rooftops. Wind moved through chimneys like a thing with opinions. The boys attended one school, naturally, and the girl another because the grown world had many habits it mistook for wisdom. On Saturdays and Sundays, they were permitted to meet at the house of a kindly unmarried lady named Miss Hervey, whose generosity was beyond question and whose furniture was beyond forgiveness. It was one of those houses. The camera glides through its narrow hallway, umbrellas stand polished like a soldier's boot, framed scripture prints aligned with military precision, clocks ticking in separate rooms as though unwilling to agree. Antimacassars sat stiffly on chairs like folded hands. The air smelled of lavender water, old paper, and restraint. Children entering such a house became less themselves. Voices dropped without being told. Laughter seemed to strike the ceiling and fall dead. Even whispers felt disorderly. Toys, had any existed there, would have apologized for themselves. So they sat on horsehair chairs and spoke in careful fragments while the clock consumed the afternoon. Then they would dream. Home waited in Hampshire not merely a house, but a kingdom of ordinary miracles. Forest tracks soft with pine needles. Fields that changed color with weather. Gates to swing on. Streams to dam badly. Trees fit for climbing and arguments fit for settling. A place where doors banged honestly and conversation required no permission. Where play rose naturally from the ground like grass. And there would be Cousin Betty. Plans had already been made in the sacred, reckless manner of children. Expeditions, forts, disguises, discoveries, games that would last entire days and become law by sunset. But plans are delicate creatures. Betty's school broke up first. She reached the Hampshire house ahead of them, kissed everyone twice, unpacked half a trunk and began to have measles almost immediately. The news arrived by letter and telegram. We move now to the children reading it. Jerry standing rigid at the mantel, Jimmy blinking as if the words might rearrange themselves. Kathleen clutching the page so hard it crackled in her hands. 7 weeks at Miss Hervey's. Impossible. They wrote home at once 3 separate appeals full of outrage, persuasion, and underlined misery. Their parents, who had always considered dear Miss Hervey a blessing of the first order, were astonished to learn she had become a sentence of imprisonment. Still, they were kind about it. Jolly decent, Jerry would later pronounce. Letters crossed roads. Telegram boys rang bells. Decisions were made over breakfast tables and in hallways smelling of ink. At last an arrangement emerged from the adult machinery of inconvenience. The boys were to spend the holidays at Kathleen's school. By then the term had ended. The girls were gone. The mistresses too, save one solitary Frenchwoman who remained like a final chess piece after the board had been cleared. "It'll be better than Miss Hervey's," Kathleen declared when the boys came round to ask Mademoiselle when they might arrive. She stood on the steps, chin lifted, sunlight in her hair, speaking with the authority of someone whose domain was at stake. "And our school isn't half so ugly as yours. We have tablecloths on the tables and curtains at the windows. Yours is all deal boards and desks and inkiness." The boys protested, of course, because boys must defend their institutions however grim. But even they knew she was right. When they left to pack their boxes, Kathleen set about transforming the empty school. Down corridors hollow with summer silence she went, carrying flowers in jam jars. Marigolds mostly bright, stubborn things from the back garden, smelling of pepper and dust. She placed them on washstands, windowsills, mantelpieces. Their orange heads caught the late light like small flames. The front garden held geraniums, calceolarias, lobelias in disciplined beds of red and yellow and blue, but those were forbidden flowers, and forbidden flowers often bloom untouched. Evening gathered slowly. Tea things were cleared. Shadows lengthened across the floors. Somewhere a distant cart rattled past the gates. Upstairs, Kathleen unpacked the boys' clothes into painted chests of drawers. She smoothed shirts with solemn hands, stacked stockings into tidy heaps, arranged collars and handkerchiefs with exaggerated care. In that fading room, she felt suddenly older than she was custodian, hostess, conspirator. Then she shut the final drawer and turned. "We ought to have some sort of play to keep us going through the holidays." The boys looked up. A pause. The kind that comes before weather breaks. "Suppose," she said, eyes bright now with dangerous invention, "we write a book." "You couldn't," said Jimmy. He delivered it from the edge of the bed, where he sat swinging one heel against the painted wood, the tone of a younger brother who considered contradiction both duty and recreation. Kathleen drew herself up at once. "I didn't mean me, of course," she said, wounded dignity tightening every syllable. "I meant us." Across the room, Jerry to those entitled lay half sideways in a chair, all elbows and careless authority, examining the ceiling as though civilization had bored him. "Too much fag," he said briefly. The evening room held the warm disorder of recent arrival, trunks yawning open, paper wrappings on the floor, a sock hanging absurdly from a drawer, crumbs from tea still on a tray abandoned near the window. Outside, the school grounds were settling into dusk. A rook called once from somewhere unseen, then silence folded back over the lawns. "If we wrote a book," Kathleen persisted, refusing extinction, "about what the insides of schools really are like, people would read it and say how clever we were." "More likely expel us," said Gerald, sitting up now. Ideas interested him only when they involved movement. "No, we'll have an out-of-doors game, bandits or something of that sort." His eyes sharpened. The room seemed to wake with him. "It wouldn't be bad if we could get a cave and keep stores in it and have our meals there." "There aren't any caves," said Jimmy at once, because a scent was beneath him. "And besides, your precious mamselle won't let us go out alone, as likely as not." "Oh, we'll see about that," said Gerald, already rising. I'll go and talk to her like a father." Kathleen gave a short laugh and pointed one accusing thumb at him. Like that, he paused before the narrow mirror over the washstand. Even in the fading glass, the indictment was fair enough. Hair in rebellion, collar askew, face marked by travel and biscuit dust, hands carrying traces of several occupations. He considered himself gravely. To brush his hair and his clothes and to wash his face and hands was to our hero but the work of a moment, Gerald announced. Then he set about becoming the hero. Water splashed in the basin. Brushes thudded. A comb dragged through resistance. Buttons were found and persuaded into place. In minutes the shabby campaigner vanished, and another boy emerged. He was sleek now, brown from weather, thin from growth, with a quickness about him that suggested future trouble. His gray eyes could widen into innocence at command. The corners of his mouth knew how to droop just enough to invite protection. It was an expression perfected for use upon adults who had not yet learned him. A dangerous gift. He crossed the corridor, where the long boards creaked beneath his polished caution, and stopped outside the parlor door. Light glowed under it in a yellow band. Somewhere inside, a page turned. He knocked. "Entrez," came the answer, sharp and French and a little lonely. He entered. The parlor smelled of lamp oil, stale roses, and the faint medicinal polish of school furniture. Mademoiselle sat near the lamp with a yellow-covered book open in her lap, though she had clearly not been reading the last line for some time. The room around her wore that temporary sadness rooms acquire when everyone else has gone home. "Eh bien?" she said, not unkindly, though impatience flickered at the edges. Gerald lowered his lashes and stepped forward. "I hope I am not disturbing you." In his mouth, innocence became an art form. "But no." Her tone softened despite herself. "What is it that you desire?" "I thought I ought to come and say how do you do," he said, "because of you being the lady of the house." He extended a hand newly washed, still red from scrubbing, dampness lingering in the knuckles. She took it. "You are a very polite little boy." "Not at all," said Gerald, becoming more polite by the second. "I am so sorry for you. It must be dreadful to have us to look after in the holidays." A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. "But not at all. I am sure you will be very good children's." His face became solemn with promise. One might have trusted him with crown jewels. "We'll try," he said earnestly. For a moment, she looked younger. The lamplight gentled the lines of fatigue around her eyes. Outside the open transom, night insects tapped at the dark. "Can one do anything for you?" she asked kindly. "Oh, no, thank you," said Gerald, who had now arrived at the true business with exquisite patience. "We don't want to give you any trouble at all." He hesitated just enough. "And I was thinking it would be less trouble for you if we were to go out into the woods all day tomorrow and take our dinner with us something cold, so as not to be a trouble to the cook." The lamp flame stirred. Somewhere in the corridor, unseen, two children held their breath. "You are very considerate," said Mademoiselle coldly. The chill in her voice entered the room before the words had finished. It settled over the lamp, the book, the polished arms of the chair. Gerald stood motionless beneath it, all meekness and scrubbed hands. Then his eyes smiled. They had a way of doing that independently of the rest of him while his mouth remained grave, while his posture stayed dutiful, while innocence continued to occupy the face. A glint escaped him before he could cage it. Mademoiselle saw. The severity broke at once. She laughed first day bright, surprised sound that changed the room entirely, and Gerald, relieved of ceremony, laughed with her. "Little deceiver," she said, pointing a finger at him. "Why not say, at once you wish to be free of surveillance, how you say overwatching? Why pretend it is me you wish to please?" Gerald spread his hands in frank surrender. "You have to be careful with grown-ups," he said. "But it isn't all pretense either. We don't want to trouble you, and we don't want you to dash. To trouble you," she finished. Their eyes met. A treaty was signed without paper. "And bien. Your parents, they permit these days in woods." "Oh yes," said Gerald truthfully, if not comprehensively. "Then I shall not be more dragon than the parents. I will forewarn the cook. Are you content?" "Rather." The word leapt from him before gratitude could be arranged properly. "Mademoiselle, you are a dear." She blinked. "A deer? A stag?" "No, a sherry," said Gerald, seizing what scraps of French he possessed and improving them boldly. "A regular A1 sherry." Her laughter returned, richer now. "And you shall not repent it," he continued grandly. "Is there anything we can do for you, wind your wool, or find your spectacles, or dash? He thinks me a grandmother." She laughed so hard the yellow-covered book slid from her lap to the carpet. "Go then," she said, waving him away, "and be not more naughty than you must." The corridor outside lay in dim expectancy. Two faces appeared at once from the shadows. "Well, what luck?" hissed Jimmy. "It's all right," said Gerald, with the weary indifference of a statesman returning for negotiations. "I told you it would be." He passed them slowly, enjoying the pause. The ingenuous youth won the regard of the foreign governess, who in her youth had been the beauty of her humble village. "I don't believe she ever was," said Kathleen promptly. "She's too stern." Said Gerald, descending the stairs with one hand on the rail like a prince entering court. "That is because you don't know how to manage her. She wasn't stern with me." Jimmy snorted. "I say, what a humbug you are though, aren't you?" "No, I'm a what's its name. Something like an ambassador. Diplomatist, that's what I am." "Diplomatist," said Kathleen. "That's what I said." He threw open the dining room door. "Anyhow, we've got our day. And if we don't find a cave in it, my name's not Jack Robinson." Supper that night was presided over by a mademoiselle less severe than Kathleen had ever known. The dining hall, stripped of term-time noise, felt cavernous in the lamplight. Long tables ran away into shadow. Windows reflected the room back at itself. Outside, summer dark pressed gently at the panes while moths battered themselves against the glass. The meal was bread and treacle spread several hours before and now possessing the texture of roofing material. Slices lay in rows like punishment. Gerald, however, behaved as though attending a banquet. He rose to hand Mademoiselle the butter. He offered cheese with grave courtesy. He urged her to sample the bread and treacle with the solicitude of a host. "Ah," she exclaimed after one bite, "it is like sand in the mouth of a dryness. Is it possible this pleases you?" "No," said Gerald serenely. "It is not possible, but it is not polite for boys to make remarks about their food." For a second there was silence. Then Mademoiselle laughed so suddenly the cook, listening somewhere beyond the door, dropped a spoon. There was no more dried bread and treacle for supper after that. Later, on the landing, candlelight wavering against the walls, Kathleen caught Gerald by the sleeve as they said goodnight. "How do you do it?" she whispered, admiration overcoming justice. He lowered his candle, letting shadows sharpen his features into mystery. "Oh, it's quite easy once you've got a grown-up to see what you're after. You watch where the hinges are." He considered this image, pleased by it. "I shall drive her with a rain of darning cotton after this." Jimmy, already halfway into bed, groaned aloud. Morning came pale and clean. The school grounds were silvered with dew. Sparrows quarreled in the gutters. Somewhere beyond the wall, a milk cart rattled over stones, and the day smelled of wet earth, leaves, and distant bread ovens waking in town. Gerald rose earlier than the others. Barefoot and buttoning his shirt, he slipped into the garden where marigolds blazed gold in the slanting sun. Behind them, hidden like treasure, he found a plant of pink carnation soft, frilled, extravagant things no one had mentioned. He gathered a small bunch carefully. Black cotton served for ribbon. It was all he had. When breakfast was laid, he placed the flowers on Mademoiselle's plate and returned to his seat wearing the expression of one who has merely moved a spoon. She entered a moment later, saw them, stopped. Something in her face changed before anyone could pretend not to notice. The sternness loosened. The years fell back a little. She lifted the carnations, touched them once with her fingers, and smiled. It made her, for an instant, quite handsome. Then she tucked the flowers into her belt, and the room seemed suddenly much more on their side. "Do you think it's quite decent?" Jimmy asked later, with the grave tone boys reserve for moral accusations they have only half considered, sort of bribing people to let you do as you like with flowers and things and passing them the salt. They were upstairs again, sunlight moving across the bare floorboards and pale bars, the morning not yet fully begun. Boots lay abandoned under chairs. A basin still held the cloudy remains of washing water. Somewhere below, crockery sounded faintly from the kitchen. Gerald, stretched across the bed and lacing one boot with leisurely superiority, opened his mouth to answer. Kathleen spoke first. "It's not that." The suddenness of it surprised them all, herself included. She stood by the window fastening her hat, looking out over the empty school lawn where the grass steamed gently after rain. Her reflection floated in the glass beside the garden beyond. "I know what Gerald means," she said. "Only I never think of the things in time myself." She turned then, earnestness bright in her face. "You see, if you want grown-ups to be nice to you, the least you can do is to be nice to them and think of little things to please them. I never think of any myself. Jerry does. That's why all the old ladies like him." Gerald inclined his head as one receiving tribute due by law. "It isn't bribery," Kathleen finished. "It's a sort of honesty, like paying for things." Jimmy considered this with visible discomfort. Ethics were interesting only until they delayed breakfast or adventure. "Well, anyway," he said, setting the matter aside by force, "we've got a ripping day for the woods." They had. The town lay under one of those English mornings that seem freshly made. The high street, broad and unexpectedly quiet even at business hour, stretched ahead in clean sunshine. Shop front shone. Last night's rain still jeweled the leaves of the plane trees, but the road itself had dried to pale dust that glittered wherever wheels disturbed it. Windows stood open above old doorways. Somewhere unseen, a piano practiced scales badly. A butcher's boy whistled through his teeth as he wheeled a barrow of parcels. Two women paused at a corner to exchange news with lowered voices and alert eyes. The houses were old, thick-walled, self-satisfied things of brick and stone, with bowed windows and stern lintels. In the warmth, they seemed almost to lean back and bask. The three children moved through it carrying provisions, confidence, and one bottle of ginger beer between them. "But are there any woods?" Kathleen asked as they crossed the marketplace, where empty stalls still smelled faintly of cabbage leaves, damp straw, and horses. "It doesn't much matter about woods," said Gerald dreamily. He walked with hands in pockets, eyes on distances no one else could yet see. "We're sure to find something." That was always his creed. One of the chaps told me his father said that when he was a boy there used to be a little cave under the bank in a lane near the Salisbury Road. But he said there was an enchanted castle there too, so perhaps the cave isn't true either. "If we were to get horns," said Kathleen, "and blow them very hard all the way, we might find a magic castle." Jimmy gave her the look of one burdened by practical relatives. "If you've got the money to throw away on horns, well, I have as it happens. So there." She produced the coins with triumph. The shop was tiny and overfull, as if it had swallowed half the town and forgotten how to digest it. Its bulging window displayed sweets in jars gone cloudy with age, wooden dolls with one eye each, cucumbers, sour apples, marbles, paper soldiers, stale buns, string, penny whistles, and mysteries. A bell clanged violently when they entered. The air smelled of sugar, dust, and pickles. They emerged with horns. The quiet square by the church where respectable houses stood in orderly rows and curtains twitched at disturbances was presently shaken by long, ecstatic blasts. Doors did not open. Windows did. A terrier barked itself hoarse. A clergyman on the far side of the green stopped mid-step and stared over his spectacles. One upper sash descended 2 inches in outrage. But none of the houses turned into enchanted castles, so they marched on. The Salisbury Road ran white in the heat beyond the town, bordered by hedges alive with insects. Larks hung somewhere invisible above the fields. Dust rose around their boots and clung to stockings. The sun strengthened. After half a mile, they agreed to drink one of the bottles of ginger beer. Jimmy, who prized efficiency when thirsty, uncorked it with a stone. "We might as well carry the ginger beer inside us as inside the bottle," he said between swallows. "And we can hide the bottle and call for it when we come back." This reasoning seemed unanswerable. They concealed the empty bottle in the hedge like treasure. Presently, the road divided. They did so with an air of deliberate mischief, one lane bending left between elm shadows, the other climbing rightward into open brightness. "There," said Gerald. "The road's going two ways at once." "That looks like adventures," said Kathleen. And because adventure often resembles poor navigation in its early stages, they took the right-hand road. At the next turning they chose left. "To be quite fair," said Jimmy. Then right, then left again. The hedges grew taller. The houses disappeared. Fields opened and closed around them in green waves. Once they passed a pond with dragonflies stitching blue fire over the surface. Once an old man in a cart nodded without surprise, as though children became lost there daily and the land had room for it. The sun climbed higher. The lanes narrowed into green tunnels where nettles brushed their legs and birds burst suddenly from bramble thickets. The sounds of town had vanished entirely. Even their own horn blasts now seemed foolish and far away. They turned another corner expecting recognition. There was none. Another bend, another gate, another lane exactly like the last, and yet not the same. The children slowed. For the first time that morning, the world seemed larger than their plans. They were completely lost. "Completely," said Kathleen. "How jolly." She said it with the delighted certainty of someone to whom danger was still a word adults used too often. Her hat had slipped crooked with walking, and a strand of hair clung damply to one cheek. She looked less like a lost child than a young commander pleased by unexpected developments. Above them, the world had changed. The open roads and bright fields were gone. Trees now leaned together overhead, their branches interlacing into a shifting green roof through which sunlight fell in broken coins. The lane had narrowed to a hollow way sunk between high banks thick with bramble, fern, and elder. Roots showed through the earth like old bones. The air was cooler there, touched with leaf mold and wet bark. Their horns had long since fallen silent. There was no audience left to outrage, and blowing them while climbing hills had proved more heroic in theory than in practice. "Oh, Cricky," said Jimmy suddenly, stopping in the middle of the lane with tragic emphasis. "Let's sit down a bit and have some of our dinner." He glanced at the basket. "We might call it lunch, you know," he added persuasively. So they settled themselves in the hedge where nettles had not yet claimed the seats and opened the parcels. Paper crackled. Crumbs fell. A bee inspected them professionally and moved on. They ate, not the sandwiches intended for first course, but the ripe red gooseberries meant for dessert because hunger does not respect menu order. The berries burst sharp and sweet on the tongue. Juice stained fingers. Kathleen winced at every sour one and ate another immediately. They rested there afterward, hot and dusty, boots throbbing with the ache that comes from too much road and too little glory. The lane was quiet save for distant birds and the ticking of unseen insects in the grass. Gerald leaned back against the bushes. The bushes gave way. He flung out his hands and nearly vanished backward as something solid shifted beneath him. There came a dull sliding thud, heavy and secretive, as though a buried thing had changed its mind. "Oh, Jiminy," he exclaimed, catching himself upright. "There's something hollow in there. The stone I was leaning against simply went." Jimmy sat up at once. "I wish it was a cave," he said. "But of course it isn't." "If we blow the horns, perhaps it will be," said Kathleen, and snatched up her own. She sounded one urgent blast that startled a wood pigeon from the trees and accomplished nothing visible. Gerald was already on his knees, parting branches. "I can't feel anything but air," he said, thrusting an arm through the leaves. "It's just a hole full of emptiness." The other two scrambled beside him. Together they dragged back the bushes and bent close. There was indeed a hole in the bank, dark, narrow, breathing coolness. The stone that had slipped now lay tilted below like a fallen door. "I'm going in," said Gerald. "Oh, don't." Kathleen's voice sharpened unexpectedly. "I wish you wouldn't. Suppose there were snakes." "Not likely." But even he paused long enough to strike a match. The flare hissed blue, then gold, lighting his fingers, the roots overhead, the rough throat of earth beyond. For an instant the darkness retreated. "It is a cave," he cried. He planted one knee on the mossy stone, wriggled through the opening, and disappeared. The match went out. A breathless silence followed. Leaves stirred where he had gone in. Somewhere water dripped once in the dark. "You all right?" Jimmy called. "Yes." "Come on. You'd better come feet first, there's a bit of a drop." "I'll go next," said Kathleen, because retreat after ejection would have been intolerable. She lowered herself obediently feet first. Her boots kicked wildly against empty air. "Look out." Gerald's voice came from below, muffled and irritated. "You'll have my eye out. Put your feet down, girl, not up. It's no use trying to fly here, there's no room." There was a rustle, a gasp, then a thump as he hauled her by the ankles and then steadied her under the arms. Dry leaves crackled under her boots. The air smelled of earth long shut away. She stood blinking into blackness. Jimmy came after in the least advisable manner possible head first, arms tucked, like a diver committing himself to an invisible sea. He landed in a heap among leaves and indignation. "It is a cave," said Kathleen softly. The words seemed to belong there. Gerald, meanwhile, had wedged himself in the entrance so that a ragged rim of daylight framed his shoulders. The young explorers, he announced in a rich narrative tone, dazzled at first by the darkness of the cave, could see nothing. "Darkness doesn't dazzle," said Jimmy at once, rubbing his elbow. "I wish we got a candle," said Kathleen. "Yes, it does," Gerald replied with confidence untouched by fact. Could see nothing. But their dauntless leader, whose eyes had grown used to the dark while the clumsy forms of the others were bunging up the entrance, had made a discovery. "Oh, what?" Both voices came together. They were used to Gerald's habit of turning life into a story while it happened. In calmer moments they objected to it. In dangerous moments they endured it badly. Now, in the cave's breathing dark, with roots overhead and the world outside reduced to a slit of light, even Jimmy waited. He did not reveal the dread secret to his faithful followers, said Gerald, in the resonant voice of serialized adventure, till one and all had given him their word of honor to be calm. The cave held his words strangely. They struck the stone and came back smaller. "We'll be calm, all right," said Jimmy impatiently. Dust tickled his nose. Dry leaves shifted beneath his boots. Somewhere close, something tiny skittered deeper into the earth. "Well then, Dash," Gerald dropped the narrator at once. The grand tone vanished. A boy remained. "There's a light over there," he said sharply. "Look behind you." They turned. There it was. At first only a faint grayness laid softly across the brown wall of the cave, as if the stone itself remembered daylight. Then, farther on, a clear strip of pale brightness cut off by a dark edge. Light around a corner. Open space beyond. For a moment none of them spoke. The darkness behind them had already become ordinary. This new brightness felt like a promise. "Attention," said Gerald. What came out was shun, the clipped bark of command inherited from military households and enthusiastically misapplied. By instinct rather than obedience, the other two straightened. "You will remain at attention till I give the word slow march," he continued, "on which you will advance cautiously in open order, following your hero leader, taking care not to tread on the dead and wounded." "I wish you wouldn't," said Kathleen at once. Her voice was smaller than before. "There aren't any," said Jimmy, reaching sideways in the dark. "He only means take care not to tumble over stones and things." His hand found hers. She screamed. The sound flew down the cave like a startled bird. "It's only me," Jimmy said, offended. "I thought you'd like me to hold it, but you're just like a girl." Their eyes were adjusting now. Shapes separated from shadow. They could make out rough stone walls sweating faint damp, roots protruding overhead, the uneven floor littered with loose earth and pebbles. The cave ran straight for 3 or 4 yards, then turned sharply to the right where the gray light waited. "Death or victory," said Gerald cheerfully. "Now, then slow march." He advanced. Each step was chosen with exaggerated care. Stones shifted underfoot. Dry leaves whispered. The air grew cooler near the turn, then suddenly fresher, touched with fern and sun-warmed greenery. Gerald rounded the corner first. "A sail! A sail!" he cried. "What?" But Kathleen was already past the bend. She stopped dead and drew a long breath. How splendid! Then she stepped forward into sunlight. Jimmy followed more cautiously. "I don't see any sail," he said. No one answered. They had emerged into a hidden gully. It was narrow and deep, sunk between banks of old stone mantled in moss. Ferns feathered every crack. Long grasses leaned from crevices and trembled when touched by wind above. Trees rooted along the rim arched their branches overhead, so that the place became a roofed corridor of shifting green and gold. Sunlight filtered through leaves in moving patches, bright one instant, gone the next. Dust motes drifted in those beams like sparks underwater. The air smelled of damp rock, crushed leaves, and summer shade. A path of green-gray flagstones sloped downward before them, half buried under drifts of old leaves. At the far end stood another round archway, black within, framed by stone and overhung with grass, roots, and bushes. It looked as if the hill had grown a mouth. "It's like the outside of a railway tunnel," said Jimmy, practical even in wonder. "It's the entrance to the Enchanted Castle," said Kathleen instantly. "Let's blow the horns." She had already reached for hers. "Dry up," said Gerald. The command was low this time. The hidden place had altered even him. He glanced toward the dark arch, as though something there might glance back. Then, because he could never resist performance entirely, the bold captain, he said in a muttered narrative tone, reproving the silly chatter of his subordinates' dash. "I like that," said Jimmy, indignant. "I thought you would," Gerald returned smoothly. Of his subordinates, bade them advance with caution and in silence, because after all there might be somebody about, and the other arch might be an ice house or something dangerous. The breeze passed overhead. Leaves whispered among themselves. From the dark arch below came no sound at all. "What?" Kathleen asked anxiously. Her voice dropped of itself before the dark arch, as voices do near places that seem to listen. "Bears, perhaps," said Gerald briefly. He said it without turning, merely to improve the atmosphere. "There aren't any bears without bars in England anyway," said Jimmy. "They call bears bars in United States," he added absently, pleased to contribute geography no one had requested. "Quick march," said Gerald. It was his only reply. So they marched. The path beneath the drifted leaves was unexpectedly firm, old stone hidden under years of weather and neglect. Their feet shuffled softly over it. Damp leaf mold released a rich woodland smell with every step. Above, branches moved and stitched the light into restless patterns over the gully walls. At the lower arch they halted. It yawned black and cool before them. "There's steps down," said Jimmy, peering in. His words vanished into the darkness below. "It is an ice house," said Gerald. "Don't let's," said Kathleen at once. The cheerfulness had gone from her now. Hidden gullies were delightful. Underground staircases belonged to another category. "Our hero," said Gerald grandly, who nothing could dismay, raised the faltering hopes of his abject minions by saying that he was jolly while going on, and they could do as they liked about it. "If you call names," said Jimmy hotly, "you can go on by yourself," he added with final force. "So there." "It's part of the game, silly," said Gerald kindly, which only made it worse. "You can be captain tomorrow, so you'd better hold your jaw now and begin thinking what names you'll call us when it's your turn." That was fair enough to silence argument. Very slowly they descended. The steps were narrow and damp at the edges, worn by feet from some forgotten time. A vaulted stone roof curved low overhead. Moisture glimmered on the walls. Their own breathing sounded loud. The smell was of cold earth, wet lime, and shut places. At the last step, Gerald struck a match. The flare leapt suddenly, gilding 3 faces, the close masonry, the sudden continuation of the passage where no stair should have been. It ran level now and turned sharply left. "This," said Jimmy, relieved by reason, "will take us back into the road." "Or under it," said Gerald. "We've come down 11 steps." The match burned his fingers and died. Darkness dropped over them again like cloth. They went on. Gerald led more slowly now, one hand on the wall, one foot testing ahead. He explained that he feared steps. No one believed him, but no one objected to caution. The passage was very black. Their shoulders brushed stone. Once Kathleen caught at Jimmy's sleeve for no reason except that it was there. "I don't half like it," Jimmy whispered. No one laughed. Then far ahead a glimmer, small at first, pale as breath on glass. It widened as they moved, grew brighter, became shape, opening, daylight pouring through another arch. They emerged and stopped. Silence took them completely. Before them lay a scene so unlike anything expected, so unlike the lane, the cave, the school, the town, that for several seconds they could only stare. A short avenue of cypresses ran straight from the archway, dark and elegant, widening as it descended toward a broad marble terrace blazing white in the sun. The children moved forward as if summoned and leaned on the smooth balustrade, blinking in the brilliance. Below lay a lake, not a pond, not a pool, but a true shining lake of storybooks and engravings. Its surface held the sky in pieces. Swans drifted upon it with insolent calm. In the center rose a little island tufted with weeping willows whose branches trailed the water like long green fingers. Beyond the lake, lawns sloped upward in rich green sweeps broken by groves of trees. Among those trees gleamed white statues' arms, shoulders, faces half hidden in shade, as though marble people were trying not to be seen. To the left, against a small hill, stood a round white temple with pillars. To the right, a waterfall spilled down mossy rocks in bright ribbons, flashing and foaming before it joined the lake below. Stone steps descended from the terrace to the water's edge. Other stairways curved toward the lawns. Farther off, deer grazed in the sunlight, lifting their heads now and then with delicate suspicion. And in the distance, where the groves thickened almost to forest, rose enormous gray shapes of stone vast forms whose purpose none of them could guess. Towers? Ruins? Giants asleep under weather? The air smelled of warm stone, water, clipped grass, and flowers hidden somewhere out of sight. Birds called across the open space. The waterfall made a constant silver sound. "This chap at school dash," Gerald began, breathless for once. "It is an enchanted castle," said Kathleen. She said it softly, but with complete conviction. Jimmy squinted across the wonder of it all. "I don't see any castle," he said. "What do you call that then?" Gerald pointed beyond a belt of lime trees where, rising clean above the green canopy, white towers and turrets pierced the blue sky. They had been hidden before, perhaps by angle, perhaps by design. Now they stood revealed in the distance, bright as carved sugar in the noon light. Jimmy narrowed his eyes. "There doesn't seem to be anyone about," said Kathleen, turning slowly where she stood. "And yet it's all so tidy." She looked at the clipped lawns, the gravel lines without weed or scatter, the terraces scrubbed by sun, the statues unstained by neglect. No rake lean forgotten, no bucket stood abandoned, no voice drifted from any servant's yard. "I believe it is magic." "Magic mowing machines," Jimmy suggested. He said it stoutly, though even he lowered his voice a little. "If we were in a book," Kathleen went on, "it would be an enchanted castle certain to be." "It is an enchanted castle," said Gerald in hollow tones fit for prophecy. "But there aren't any." Jimmy was entirely positive, which was one of his most vulnerable habits. "How do you know?" Gerald wheeled on him. "Do you think there's nothing in the world but what you've seen?" The scorn descended like artillery. Jimmy endured it and returned fire. "I think magic went out when people began to have steam engines," he said, counting on his fingers, "and newspapers and telephones and wireless telegraphing." "Wireless is rather like magic when you come to think of it," said Gerald. "Oh, that sort." Jimmy's contempt deepened into geological layers. "Perhaps," said Kathleen thoughtfully, "there's given up being magic because people didn't believe in it anymore." A breeze moved through the lime leaves then, making 1,000 silver undersides flicker at once. "Well, don't let's spoil the show with any silly old not believing," said Gerald decisively. "I'm going to believe in magic as hard as I can." He climbed onto the balustrade, balanced there for one theatrical instant, then jumped down. "This is an enchanted garden. That's an enchanted castle, and I'm jolly well going to explore." His voice rang across the terrace. The dauntless knight then led the way, leaving his ignorant squires to follow or not, just as they jolly well chose. He strode down toward the lawn, boots striking the stone steps in a clatter full of destiny. The others followed because they always did. There never was such a garden, or if there was, it belonged properly in a painting framed in gold, or in the pages of a book with tissue guards over the illustrations. They crossed a long breadth of turf, so smooth it seemed poured rather than grown. The grass bent underfoot like velvet and sprang back without complaint. Sunlight lay warm on their shoulders. Bees worked invisibly somewhere among flowers. Water from the distant cascade kept up its bright, continuous murmur. They passed close by the deer. The creatures lifted their delicate heads and regarded the children with mild, superior curiosity. One doe chewed thoughtfully. Another flicked an ear. None fled. Their calm made the place stranger than fear would have. After the lawns came the lime trees. Their branches met overhead in piled masses of leaf, deep and fragrant, making a tunnel of green shadow where the air cooled at once. Fallen blossoms sweetened the path. Their footsteps sounded hushed there, as if the avenue itself required manners. Then suddenly sunlight again. They had entered a rose garden. It spread before them in ordered beds enclosed by thick, close-clipped-you hedges red roses, pink roses, white roses, pale yellow flushed with cream, all glowing against the dark green walls. The scent rose warm and rich, almost visible in the heat. It looked, Kathleen thought, like a giant's many-colored pocket handkerchief laid out to dry. She bent at once and buried her nose in a blossom. "I know we shall meet a gardener in a minute," she said through petals, "and he'll ask what we're doing here. And then what will you say?" "I shall say we've lost our way," said Gerald, "and it will be quite true." But no gardener came. No rake scraped gravel. No shears clicked. No distant voices discussed compost or weather. No one crossed a path or opened a door. The garden remained perfectly tended and entirely empty. The feeling of enchantment thickened. Even Jimmy stopped inventing explanations. Their own footsteps began to sound too loud in the great stillness. They lowered their voices without agreeing to do so. Somewhere a pigeon clapped suddenly from a roof unseen, and all three started. Beyond the rose garden stood another hedge of yew, older and darker than the first, with an arch cut cleanly through its center. Through the opening ran twisting green walls and narrow paths. A maze, like Hampton Court Palace maze, only more secretive. Gerald stopped at the entrance and turned to them, face solemn with command. "Now," he said, "you mark my words. In the middle of this maze we shall find the secret enchantment." He snapped an imaginary sword from an imaginary scabbard. "Draw your swords, my merry men all, and hark forward tally-ho in the utmost silence." Which, after a moment's consideration, they did. It was very hot in the maze. Between the close walls of yew, the air scarcely moved at all. Sunlight, trapped overhead, steeped itself in the dark greenery and descended heavy as steam. The paths were narrow, the clipped hedges tall and severe, their resinous scent thick in the throat. Dust clung to shoes. Leaves brushed sleeves with dry whispers as they turned each blind corner. The heart of the maze guarded itself well. Again and again they chose boldly, hurried eagerly. argued decisively and found themselves once more at the same black yew arch opening onto the rose garden like a doorway to mockery. Each return was more silent than the last. By the third, their hats were pushed back, collars loosened, tempers frayed. By the fourth, even Gerald had stopped narrating heroics. They were all glad they had brought large, clean pocket handkerchiefs. Kathleen dabbed her forehead with one corner. Jimmy mopped his face as though personally insulted by weather. Gerald wiped his neck and pretended not to be warm at all. It was then Jimmy suddenly cried, "Oh, I wish dash," he broke off. The wish died unfinished. His expression changed with alarming speed, from irritation to revelation, then to catastrophe. "Oh," his voice came out thin and strange. "Where's the dinner?" For one suspended second no one answered. Then, in a stricken collective silence, they all remembered. The basket, left at the entrance to the cave. Their minds flew back at once, and with painful tenderness to its contents, slices of cold mutton wrapped in paper, 6 red tomatoes, thick bread and butter, the little screwed-up packet of salt, apple turnovers glazed and sticky at the corners, and the small thick glass from which one drank the ginger beer. Memory sharpened appetite cruelly. "Let's go back," said Jimmy. "Now this minute, and get our things, and have our dinner." "Let's have one more try at the maze," said Gerald. "I hate giving things up." "I am so hungry," said Jimmy. "Why didn't you say so before?" Gerald asked bitterly. "I wasn't before." "Then you can't be now. You don't get hungry all in a minute." He stopped. "What's that?" At the foot of the yew hedge, among roots and dry earth, lay a gleam of red. Only a thread, thin as a line drawn by a careful hand, easy to miss unless one happened to be glaring fixably at the ground in outrage. Gerald stooped and picked it up. One end was tied to a thimble. Not an ordinary thimble, but a small silver one pierced with holes and bright despite the dust. Around its rim, delicately worked, was the shape of a crown, and the other end dash he pulled gently. "There is no other end," said Gerald, with firm triumph. "It's a clue. That's what it is." His exhaustion vanished like magic itself. "What price cold mutton now?" "I've always felt something magic would happen someday, and now it has." "I expect the gardener put it there," said Jimmy, "with a princess's silver thimble on it. Look, there's a crown on the thimble." There was. Even Jimmy had to admit that much. "Come," said Gerald in low, urgent tones. "If you are adventurers, be adventurers. And anyhow, I expect someone has gone along the road and bagged the mutton hours ago." That argument struck home. He walked forward, winding the red thread round his fingers as he went. And it was a clue. It led them left, then right, doubling where the paths crossed, slipping under leaves, stretching always onward with patient certainty. Where they had blundered before, it guided. Where they hesitated, it continued. No one spoke now. The maze seemed to lean inward, listening. At last the path widened. The thread drew them up 2 shallow stone steps worn smooth by older feet, and into the very center. There the maze opened suddenly into a round grass plot, green and still as a secret kept for centuries. A sundial stood in the middle, its shadow lying sharp upon the hour. Around the edge, set against the enclosing yew, ran a low, wide marble seat veined faintly with gray. The red clue crossed the grass straight as intention, past the sundial, and ended in a small brown hand. The hand lay relaxed upon the marble, palm downward, fingers curved lightly in sleep. Every finger wore rings set with stones that flashed in the sun ruby red, sapphire blue, emerald green. The children stopped breathing. The hand belonged, naturally, to an arm. The arm was circled with bracelets that chimed softly when a breeze touched them. It emerged from a sleeve of pink and gold brocaded silk, faded here and there by time, yet magnificent still. The sleeve belonged to a gown of rosy gold that spilled across the seat in folds of rich fabric, opening over an embroidered petticoat of tender green. Old yellow lace, the color of scalded cream, lay at throat and wrist. And over the face, hidden from them and from noon itself, was drawn a thin white veil sewn with tiny silver stars. A lady lay sleeping in the center of the maze. "It's the enchanted princess," said Gerald. This time there was no playful trumpet in his voice, no mock-heroic flourish. He spoke almost quietly, as one who has argued for marvels and is startled to find them agreeing with him. "I told you so." "It's the Sleeping Beauty," breathed Kathleen. She moved a step nearer, drawn forward by reverence stronger than caution. Sunlight touched the loose wisps of her hair. The grass brushed her ankles. It is look how old-fashioned her clothes are, like the pictures of Marie Antoinette's ladies in the history book. The silk, the lace, the powdered elegance of another age seemed to confirm everything. She has slept for 100 years. Her eyes widened further. "Oh, Gerald, you're the eldest. You must be the prince, and we never knew it." Gerald straightened involuntarily. The promotion pleased him before its duties became clear. "She isn't really a princess," said Jimmy. He said it stoutly, hands in pockets, chin lifted against enchantment itself. The others laughed at him, partly because contradiction at such a moment felt almost rude, partly because every step of the adventure, the hidden cave, the secret garden, the silent maze, the scarlet clue had laid another layer over common sense until the ordinary world seemed very far away indeed. Even Jimmy's certainties sounded smaller here. "Lift the veil up, Jerry," Kathleen whispered. "If she isn't beautiful, we shall know she can't be the princess." "Lift it yourself," said Gerald promptly. "I expect you're forbidden to touch the figures," said Jimmy. "It's not wax, silly," said Gerald. "No," said Kathleen, practical even in wonder. "Wax wouldn't be much good in the sun." She leaned closer. "And besides, you can see her breathing. It's the princess, right enough." Very gently, with fingertips that trembled just enough to notice, she lifted the edge of the starry veil and folded it back. The face beneath was small and pale in the brightness, framed by 2 long plaits of black hair lying over the silk like ropes of shadow. Her nose was straight, her brows finely drawn, her lashes dark upon her cheeks. Across the bridge of nose and cheekbones lay a dusting of freckles. "No wonder," whispered Kathleen, "sleeping all these years in all this sun." Her mouth was not precisely a rosebud, nor was she like the impossible ladies in fairy book pictures. Yet there was something in the stillness of her face, in the strange dignity of sleep amid all that gold and green, that made criticism seem both petty and unsafe. "Isn't she lovely?" Kathleen murmured. Gerald made a sound that might have meant agreement, and might have meant, "Not so dusty." "Now, Jerry," said Kathleen firmly, the tone she used when arranging fate, "you're the eldest." "Of course I am," said Gerald, with the first signs of unease. "Well, you've got to wake the princess." Jimmy snorted. "She's not a princess. She's only a little girl dressed up." "But she's in long dresses," Kathleen argued. "Yes, but look how little way down her frock her feet come. She wouldn't be any taller than Jerry if she stood up." This was accurate, and therefore unwelcome. "Now then," said Kathleen. "Jerry, don't be silly. You've got to do it." "Do what?" Gerald kicked his left boot thoughtfully with his right. "Why kiss her awake, of course." "Not me." The answer came with splendid speed. "Well, someone's got to. She'd go for me as likely as not the minute she woke up," said Gerald anxiously, eyeing the sleeping figure as one might eye a sleeping terrier of uncertain temper. "I'd do it like a shot," said Kathleen, "but I don't suppose it'd make any difference me kissing her." And before either brother could object, she bent swiftly and kissed the sleeping girl's cheek. The cheek remained still. The lashes did not stir. The princess slept on. "There," said Kathleen, stepping back. "You see." The silence of the maze deepened around them. Bees hummed somewhere beyond the walls. A leaf drifted down onto the grass and landed unheard. "Then you must, Jimmy." Kathleen turned with brisk justice. "I dare say you'll do. Jump back quickly before she can hit you." "She won't hit him," said Gerald. "He's such a little chap." "Little yourself," cried Jimmy. The insult struck home at once. He drew himself up to his fullest available height, fists clenched in the pockets of his knickerbockers. "I don't mind kissing her. I'm not a coward, like some people." He gave Gerald a look sharpened for the occasion. "Only if I do, I'm going to be the dauntless leader for the rest of the day." "No. Look here, hold on," said Gerald quickly, discovering bravery a moment too late. "Perhaps I'd better dash," but Jimmy had already stepped forward. There was no ceremony in it. No trembling tenderness. No prince-like grace. He bent smartly and planted a loud, cheerful-sounding kiss upon the princess's pale cheek, then sprang back. The three children stood breathless in the green stillness of the maze. Even the bees seemed to pause. Nothing happened. Then everything did. The princess opened her eyes. They were large and dark, clear as polished chestnuts. She stretched both arms upward with the languid certainty of one accustomed to waking in comfort, yawned delicately behind a small brown hand, and sat upright among the folds of pink and gold silk. Then, quite plainly, distinctly, and with not the smallest room for mistake, she said, "Then the 100 years are over? How the yew hedges have grown!" She looked from one face to the next with grave curiosity. "Which of you is my prince that aroused me from my deep sleep of so many long years?" "I did," said Jimmy fearlessly. Now that she appeared unlikely to slap anyone, courage came easily. "My noble preserver," said the princess. She held out her hand. Jimmy seized it and shook it vigorously, as if concluding a business arrangement. "But I say," he added at once, "you aren't really a princess, are you?" "Of course I am," she answered. "Who else could I be?" She swept aside the spangled veil. Beneath it, nestled in her black hair, shone a coronet of diamonds real enough to throw shards of light across the grass. Even Jimmy blinked. "But Dash, why," she said, widening her eyes in astonishment, "you must have known about my being here, or you'd never have come. How did you get past the dragons?" Gerald ignored the question entirely. "I say," he began, stepping nearer, "do you really believe in magic and all that?" "I ought to," she said, "if anybody does." She extended one wrist. On the skin, pale against brown, was a tiny scar. "Look, here's the place where I pricked my finger with the spindle." Kathleen gasped with satisfaction. "Then this really is an enchanted castle?" "Of course it is," said the princess. "How stupid you are." She rose. The pink brocade cascaded around her in bright folds and spread over the grass like a drop sunset. Bracelets slid down her arm with a musical clink. "I said her dress would be too long," muttered Jimmy. "It was the right length when I went to sleep," said the princess calmly. "It must have grown in the 100 years." "I don't believe you're a princess at all," said Jimmy, recovering himself. "At least, Dash, don't bother about believing it if you don't like," she replied. "It doesn't so much matter what you believe as what I am." That silenced even Jimmy for a moment. She turned to Gerald and Kathleen with effortless command. "Let us go back to the castle," she said. "I'll show you all my lovely jewels and things. Wouldn't you like that?" "Yes," said Gerald, with very plain hesitation. "But Dash, but what?" Her tone carried the impatience of those unused to interruption. "But we're most awfully hungry." At once her whole face changed. "Oh, so am I. We've had nothing to eat since breakfast, and it's 3 now," said the princess, glancing at the sundial. "Why, you've had nothing to eat for hours and hours and hours." Then, with sudden tragic grandeur, "But think of me. I haven't had anything to eat for 100 years." The children considered this and found their own sufferings temporarily diminished. "Come along to the castle. The mice will have eaten everything," said Jimmy sadly. It was the remark of one who had finally accepted royalty but still mistrusted pantries. "Not they," cried the princess joyously. "You forget everything's enchanted here. Time simply stood still for 100 years." She gathered a handful of brocade, frowned at its impossible length, then extended the train behind her like a command. "Come along, and one of you must carry my train, or I shan't be able to move now it's grown such a frightful length." And just like that it begins. A quiet day, a simple escape. Nothing remarkable at first glance, but something shifts, a boundary crossed almost by accident, a place discovered that wasn't meant to be found, or perhaps was waiting all along. And in that moment, the ordinary world loosens its grip. Not broken, not gone, just thinner. You can almost feel it, can't you? That subtle unease beneath the wonder. That sense that the game they've started has rules no one explained. Not yet. And as the shadows grow a little longer, as the castle breathes just a little deeper, you begin to understand this isn't a story about finding magic. It's about what happens when magic finds you. Next time, the walls won't stay silent. The illusions won't stay harmless. And something watching from just beyond sight will finally make itself known. Stay close, Grimoire Guardians, because the deeper we go, the harder it becomes to come back unchanged.